At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Today on The James Altucher Show.
Is Jesus a Stoic?
What's interesting is St. Paul, his disciple, studies the Stoics in Tarsus, and then he gets arrested and he comes before this Roman judge. That judge is Seneca's brother. There's something about the struggle and then ultimately the falling short and the sort of bittersweetness of you got as close as you could, but some moments are lost forever. I think that's the struggle and the relatability and the essence of the book. You have to have a certain amount of self-awareness about this. Obviously, this is what we just went through with the last president. If you're not aware of your decline as it's happening and you're not able to mitigate it and you're not able to compensate for it and you're not able to ultimately know what your limitations are, you'll find yourself in an impossible situation.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is The James Altucher Show.
I would say writing is really hard to do well. And a little bit of the issue right now is everybody thinks they're a writer because I could write something on and put it on LinkedIn. I could actually have AI write it and put it on LinkedIn. And now I'm the writer. So, but it's actually really hard to tell that story. And we see so many different examples. Let me ask you, so you write these great, amazing books, bringing Stoicism into the modern day, and you tell it with modern stories. Ideas, I would say ideas piggyback on the stories you're telling. And so you have to be a good storyteller, which you are. But you usually use, almost always, I would say, you use great historical examples that are really worth remembering, and you tell in such a way that I remember them. You don't tell as many personal stories, and I'm sure you must have been asked this before, and I'm the opposite. When I write, I tend to write personal stories, some historical, but some or most personal. Why don't you write more? I want to know more personal stories. I really love the personal stories. Well, I know you. I want to hear the personal stories.
I would say it is deliberate. In some ways, it's cheating because I'm picking. The historical story has a significance and a weight to it that
yes.
That
history has chosen those stories for you. It's
yes.
survivorship bias of stories.
And there's a vague sort of familiarity or myth or significance to it by the fact that it existed, it happened a long time ago, and this person accomplished X, Y, or Z. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants or something, right? And so I think because I'm trying to I'm already facing a pretty strong headwind, which is that I'm trying to persuade people to be interested in an obscure school of ancient philosophy. I'm trying to use every advantage that I can. I always find it super lame when I pick up a book and it starts with so I was consulting with one of my clients, or, I was giving a talk to 300 healthcare professionals in Cleveland. I just find it super lame.
Right.
It doesn't
But do you
work
find
with
it
the
lame
idea.
because they're talking to a bunch of pharmacists in Cleveland, or is it lame because it just might be poor storytelling?
I think it's both. If I'm sitting down and I'm trying to, my last book was about justice, right? Or ethics. Do I want to talk about, me deciding the tip I'm going to leave at this restaurant that I got poor service at? Is that really the sort of the raw materials I want to use to have this discussion about how we treat the little guy? Or do I want to pick a story from history where a great king was treated? So it's I think it mostly has to do with the context in which I'm writing or what the idea I'm trying to be in service of. If I'm writing a book about marketing, I put myself in their because I have real experience. I think I have interesting stories.
Yeah, right.
So
that is where
it's-
you did personal stories.
Yeah. So I think you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish? And then you think about what's the best means of doing it. And this is why ego, I think, is a problem, because if what I really want to do is talk about myself, I'm going to shoehorn myself into things I have no business in being in. Or I'm going to act like my stories are much more interesting than they are. I think I just decided, hey, I'm more interested in these other people for the most part than I am in myself. But I think in your writing, which is much more personal, you don't just tell your stories aren't, oh, hey, let me tell you about this like conversation I had. It's usually like, let me tell you this moment my life was falling apart. So there's a vulnerability and a rawness to it that doesn't feel like you're trying to make yourself look good.
Right. That's the you never. If you just say, "Oh, I'm the greatest basketball player in history," that's going to fail as a story.
Unless you
you're-
are the greatest
Yeah.
basketball player
Right.
in history, yes.
Right. Otherwise, it's just like bragging. No one wants to listen to that. But I forgot who said it. I think Carrie Fisher said no one wants to watch a movie about beautiful people all the time.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. Like the way it's a smart approach where the historical stories, it's like a cheat code. So out of like the 6 or 7 billion people who have lived in human history itself has chosen the 50 or 60 best stories, and you could just tell those, even that have been told many times before, but you could tell it in your own angle, and everyone, let's just take the most obvious story of all, Jesus. We know that billions of people think that this is the best story ever. So if you write about it, you're not gonna, that history's already chosen this story for you. Like it's gonna be good depending on your angle. But whereas if you just write about yourself, like you said, it's a very hit or miss. You've got to be careful, and you could have more wider range of reaction.
And I think it's about the medium. When I'm sitting down, and this is my point about books versus some of the other ways. If I'm sitting down and writing a book that I'm going to try to make a very difficult argument that I want you to pay for and then give hours of your life, I'm going to pick the best, most interesting representations of that idea. If I'm shooting this shit on a podcast, I'll talk about myself. Or if I'm doing a social media video, or if I'm writing an article that I'm going to send out to my emails, those are very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I remember when, maybe this was 2016 or it was right before the 2016 election, you wrote an article about you and your dad having a political disagreement. And we did an entire podcast about just that article because that was important to me, that was interesting to me because you're someone I read and pay attention to, and how you dealt with this disagreement with someone very close to you who you love. That's something that everybody goes through that, and it's interesting. And so I want, as opposed to you writing about, Dwight Eisenhower had a disagreement with his dad and this is how they resolved it. Like some categories are more interesting to be personal.
No. And I think I learned from Robert that even when you're picking historical stories, you have to be super selective. And just because you know this one doesn't mean it's the best one. And so I just try to go like, hey, here's the argument that I'm trying to make. What is the best way to illustrate that or persuade people of that? And you have to sort of do that work. And that's what separates like a okay book from a really good book, or a book that lasts and a book that doesn't last.
I think that's true. And it's more particularly interesting now that because books aren't lasting as long now. Like people don't really read Hemingway anymore for pleasure. I mean, I will, but I also grew up on classic books, so maybe that's why. But I feel like the next generation, certainly the generation after that, when it exists, will not read Hemingway as much for pleasure.
I don't know. I would be curious what the sales say. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they're basically stable.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, like sort of related to what we were just talking about. Is Jesus a Stoic?
Well, what's interesting is St. Paul, his disciple, studies the Stoics in Tarsus. And then he's, when he gets arrested and he comes before this Roman judge, that judge is Seneca's brother. So like, yeah, so these things are like, I do every Christmas, I do this email, and I go like, he was born in a province of the Roman Empire. He speaks and writes about philosophy. It reaches millions of people. He talks about like loving your brother. He talks about treating people with kindness. He talks about, controlling your desires. I sort of go through all the sort of philosophy of it. And then, I go, obviously I'm talking about Jesus, right? He's put to death by the Roman state. He goes bravely. He doesn't hold any. And I go, no, actually I'm talking about Seneca. Because they have almost the exact same story. They're born in the same year in different parts of the Roman Empire. And they come at odds with the sort of sovereign power and then are forced, in their dying. They're given this sort of ultimate test of their philosophy, which is like, do they disavow it upon pain of death? And so I think it's interesting to me, sort of studying and writing a lot about that period, is it sort of changes my opinion on the Bible because, like, you read the Bible and there's parts of it that make sense, and then parts of it you're like, what is this? Right? This is weird and strange, and why don't they just say what they mean? And then if that's the only book of ancient literature you could go, oh, that's just how they were back then. And then you read Seneca or any of the Stoics or Socrates, and they're just normal people talking about regular life. They're not speaking in riddles. They don't claim to hear voices, and you go, oh, actually, like, Jesus was weird. And it's very discordant. And it makes it harder for me to appreciate that message in some ways. In other ways, I appreciate it more. But I go, this isn't the only philosopher talking about this stuff. There were other people who are much more accessible, much less mystical, maybe even more helpful to people. And we went with this other myth instead. I've always found that strange.
I wonder if it's because back then, Stoicism, to let's say what was the Greek religion, but we now call Greek mythology, there was a distance of many centuries from the beginnings of the Greek religion to Stoicism. So maybe people were kind of like, okay, those are good stories, but what else? And I feel like now in modern society, now, of course, there are a lot of literalists who take the Bible literally, but probably most people are secular and they believe in turn the other cheek, but they don't necessarily believe in every miracle and so on. So I wonder if now we're at that point where religion needs to be more philosophical because it's hard to take it literally. And maybe back in 0 AD, people like Seneca were similarly, okay, well, obviously Zeus doesn't create all the lightning storms, and I need to understand what the actual philosophy is here.
What's also weird, so Hadrian has this like boyfriend lover who drowns in the Nile River or something, right? And he's so bereft and full of grief that he like sets up this temple and this cult he like anoints him as a god, and they set up this cult that worships like his dead boyfriend. And it becomes like enormously popular, like rivaling Christianity in the early days.
Well, who was it?
I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, the point is you never even heard of it. This was just like a thing that happened, which is like these different cults or different sort of adherence to these different deities or figures would sort of take on popularity. And then some of them kept going and some of them didn't. And so I always think that's interesting that like we just sort of choose which ones. Thousands of years later, it seems like it all makes sense. But at some point, it was kind of a new
and it'd be interesting
thing.
to see why different things survive. Like why did Judaism and then Judeo-Christianism survive? Like it was just the Israelites were just one tribe of people in Israel, and they were all just like fighting it out. And I guess around 900 BC, for a brief period, for several hundred years, the Israelites won. They won all the battles, killed all the other people, and then they wrote down about their God. And that's the one. Then they were invaded, and only one small group, the Jews, lived and survived and organized. And somehow that group became everything.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. And like you say, though, every tribe, there's thousands of tribes that we never know about again.
Yes.
So like what happened?
Or like the Odyssey is the myth that survived, right? Somebody wrote that one down. It was an oral tradition that somebody wrote down. And then it's not just that they wrote it down and it survived, it's that it maintained its popularity for 2,000, 2,500 years or whatever, right? Like, we only discovered Gilgamesh, which is a similar epic myth, also really interesting, also a foundational cultural idea for a group of people. But it was basically lost until the 1850s. So it's only had 150. It's not that it's however old that it is. It's however old it is and has remained in circulation, right? So it's that we've been telling and retelling. Like, Matt Damon's going to star in the Odyssey, and Christopher Nolan's
It's a bad
making.
choice. Christopher Nolan is great, but okay.
But you know what? Like, and then there was Ralph Fiennes is also in a movie about Odysseus that is coming out. Like, we've just been retelling this story for thousands of years in every medium possible, right? And so it's not that it's old, it's that it's perpetually made new that's made it so powerful. Whereas Gilgamesh, for 2,000 of the years, was obscured and unknown. And then for the last 150 years, some people have been reading it.
I wonder though if it's, I mean, I would say Gilgamesh is less a story about survival than Odysseus and Jesus and Buddha.
It's still the hero's journey. I'm just saying. But what I'm saying is that because school children weren't taught Gilgamesh from the year 1 to the year 1850,
Yeah.
is why it's not as culturally salient. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just it wasn't told and retold and retold and told and retold and reinterpreted and mean something new to each generation. It missed 18 generations.
Take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It means so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. No judgment here from me. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, meet Rougiette Ready. And Rougiette is spelled R-U-G, like rug, and I-E-T. Other companies rely on similar ingredients to support blood flow, but Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to help amplify arousal in the brain and increase blood flow. So it makes you excited in the brain and it increases the blood flow where it's important. And if the usual pills still aren't doing the trick, Rougiette Ready could be the answer. It's a 3-in-1 formula, dissolves under your tongue to absorb fast, so you'll be ready in just 15 minutes on average, not hours, and effects can last up to 36 hours. That means you can stay confident, present, and in control when the moment's right. And if you want proof, over 150,000 men have made the switch, and you could read their customer reviews right on the site. Getting started is simple. Rougiette connects you with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships quickly to your door. Connect with your provider at rougiette.com/James. You got to use my special code. Rougiette and I have worked out a deal. So rougiette.com, that's RUGIET.com/James, to see if a Rougiette Ready prescription is right for you. Just use code James to get 15% off. That's RUGIET.com/James and use promo code James to get 15% off today. Head to rougiette.com/James and use code James to get 15% off today. So if you use the code, you support the show, and it shows Rougiette that we sent you there. Now, individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information.
In the time it takes you to actually board that flight from Group 8,
Now boarding Premier Altitude Elite Club members.
you could have bought a Hyundai on Amazon. Yes, that Amazon, where you buy everything else.
Mid-tier Altitude Elite, feel free to board now.
So while you're waiting for them to make up new boarding groups, you can order your dream car and the dealer will have it ready in no time.
Now boarding groups 1 through 7.
So close. Visit HyundaiUSA.com or call 562-314-4603 for more details. Limited availability, pickup through participating Hyundai dealer in select markets.
So
So then you take your books on Stoicism. They are using this idea of what you just described, which is, okay, how do I take this beautiful philosophy that you personally believe in and bring it into a modern context so perhaps it is taught, and so that it does at least bridge from this generation to the next. And you tell these modern stories, like here's Harry Truman, here's John McCain, and you kind of, and by the way, which are good choices because you have Democrats, Republicans, you're kind of neutral there, and you bring these stories together to talk about this philosophy, which really is a modern philosophy. It just previously has been told in these ancient ways. Like, it's not that obscure, the idea of being a virtuous person and overcoming hardship and doing these. But let's stop saying it in terms of Socrates, taking hemlock, and let's put it in terms of a prisoner of war in the Korean War and so on.
Yeah. I'm trying to take the ideas and illustrate them and demonstrate them and put them up for discussion, which is what philosophy is supposed to be, but sort of isn't anymore. And so, yeah, you're supposed to agree with some of the stories, disagree about some of the stories, raise different questions. Well, what about this? Or, okay, Rockefeller is interesting here, but isn't he also a shitty person? Like, it's supposed to generate those kinds of questions. It's not supposed to be definitive.
Which Robert Greene is like such an expert at, like, because he'll take all these historical stories, some you know, some you don't. And when you don't know them, you're like, oh my God, Shi Shu was the empress of China in 400 BC, like, and there was a war. And like, like all these stories that are, so you get this sense that he is such an amazing historian, but then he's bringing it into discussing these laws of power. But then there's the opposite side of each story, like the opposite of each law of power, which also could apply. It's just his books are genius.
Well, the big breakthrough moment for me when I was Robert Greene's research assistant is so he talks a lot in the 48 Laws of Power about the Peloponnesian War, and one of this and what predates it, obviously. But he's taught. I was curious. He has this great chapter in the 48 Laws of Power on the Battle of Marathon, and I saw him one day and I said, Robert, what book did you read to write about the Battle of Marathon? And he recommended some book by some academic, and I went and I read it, and so I read his thing. And then I went and I read this, big book about, and then when I finished it, I saw what he did. Like, I saw how this book became these pages. And like Brian Koppelman talks about like the moment you realize you can do it or how it works. That was just like a huge breakthrough moment in my career and my understanding of sort of history and writing, where I saw the finished product and then the source material. And I just realized like, oh, that's the magic trick. It's not actually magic. This is how the magician does it.
So what was the bridge between the source and the
I did like I think there was even I saw how like these 5 sentences became one sentence, or that Robert read this, like this academic studied this thing for 30 years, and Robert Greene read it and realized that the critical, like he distilled it all down to he had a take on what this guy's sort of historical explanation, and Robert reduced it all down to this very specific lesson. And then he used the raw materials to tell that story in a way that demonstrates that lesson in a couple paragraphs. And that's basically the same magic trick that I do in my books. I have a story about Lincoln in my new book, and I thought I'd already read a lot about Lincoln. And I went down to write it, and I realized it didn't have the material that I needed. And so I went and I probably cumulatively read 10,000 pages on Lincoln. And that is maybe a 7,000 word chapter in the book. And
wow,
so
in this coming book, this next book.
Yeah. So 10,000 pages to 7,000 words. That's
7,000 words is still a lot. I mean, it's 20 pages or
longer
so.
than I normally do. But yeah, the process of going, like I stacked all the books up. It's like taller than me, like from the floor to much taller than me. And what I was looking for is the sort of essence of, like, not Lincoln, every biographical detail and every place and thing that he ever said, but the argument I was making about Lincoln as this sort of man who fused both sort of pragmatism and wisdom and understanding of human nature with also this sort of aspiration, this sort of belief in something better. That's what I was trying to get at. And I had to go consume all this material to get the pieces that I wanted to make, to take the reader on a journey from here to here. And that's what I read. That's reading this book from that Robert recommended and seeing that that's how it became 2 paragraphs. I just did that's what I do every day is I am reading and finding and developing stuff and then, trying to put it in some form or some story. But that's the magic trick.
And it's not that easy because you always have to have a unique take.
Yeah.
Like if it's not unique, then no one should read your book.
Sure.
So like and Robert does it very well. You do that very well. It's even though it's a cheat code to take these historical stories that have survived, it's to turn it into your own story about this person is still a difficult skill.
Well, every writer or every sort of filmmaker or whatever has like their sort of like it's very clear to me that what Michael Lewis does is he finds characters. Like he wants to write about the financial crisis, but he doesn't sit down and tell you about the financial crisis. He finds a handful of weirdos who are his way in, or he doesn't want to talk about a pandemic. He talks about, a bunch of different public health officials, or he wants to talk about bureaucrats. And it's very clear that he must go look. He has an idea for a story he wants to tell, and then he doesn't start until he finds the people, right? And you have to, so that's his thing. He's a character-driven. His magic trick is he finds a group of people who you and I would probably not think are that interesting or pass right over. His skill, what he's honed over tens of thousands of hours, is like he can identify who those characters is. He wants to talk about football. He finds the story of the blindside kid, this, and how that position in football explains everything. And that's his genius. Malcolm Gladwell is, he finds sort of counterintuitive scientific research. And then he finds stories that illustrates but every person kind of has their...
And Michael Lewis is interesting because his first book, which arguably might be his best book, it's hard to decide, but I loved his first book, Liar's Poker, is about him. That is the personal story.
Yes, it's less character driven, but all the other guys are these weird maniacs.
Yeah.
He's more of a character in that book, but he's more the Nick Carraway of that book. He's not actually like Nick Carraway is not the main character of The Great Gatsby. He's looking up at Gatsby, and that's what Liar's Poker is.
Yeah, that's true. I enjoyed Liar's Poker, but it inspired a generation of people to like work on Wall Street.
To do the opposite of what he was trying to say.
Yeah, even though he portrays the worst kind of world in Liar's Poker, it's like everyone reads that, then that's it, I'm working on Wall Street.
I gave a talk at this thing yesterday, and this guy came up to me, and he was like, I read your book, Trust Me, I'm Lying. It's changed my life. It's why I got into marketing. And I was just like, that exact thing, like the opposite of what I was trying to do in that book.
Well, I guess it's because it's a fascinating world and subculture. Like all of these books also, their characters exist in cultures, but really more in subcultures, which exist in cultures. And so the Trust Me, I'm Lying describes this magic. And so it's your first book, right? Trust Me, I'm Lying. I mean, that's how I met you.
We had a dinner for that.
Yeah,
book.
The dinner for the day the book was published, or the week the book was published.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was sitting next to you. You said to me, you said to me about my writing. You said it's like you came out of nowhere. You just started writing, and I felt it was like you came out of nowhere because it was your first book that just was getting published. So, but Trust Me, I'm Lying also portrays this subculture of marketing where there is this group of guys like what you started out as an 18-year-old who somehow know or are creative enough to figure out these tricks almost to, inspire thousands or millions of people to do something. Oh, I'm going to buy an American Apparel shirt, or I'm going to buy, Tucker's book or whatever. So all the fascinating stuff you've worked on. So,
yeah. So are you going to do one more book, you think?
Okay, here's a question. This is, I remember I was talking to Robert Greene and I was describing offline something I was doing. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is the best book. You've got to write this book. But now I'm having a problem. I was going to ask you your advice. So I was good at something as a kid, and I stopped doing that thing for 30 years almost, and now I'm trying to be good as an adult. So it's chess. I was a chess master as a kid. Yeah. And I stopped playing for 30 years. And during that 30 years, I became successful in a lot of other ways. But of course, if you're not doing something at all, you lose ability. And it's a very hard game. Like, it requires thousands of hours of discipline to even get as good as I was, let alone someone who's a professional player. But I'm trying now to get the same kind of ranking that I had back then. And you would think it doesn't matter your age, but somehow it does. And the interesting thing is, because I've now had success in other areas and my life has built up, okay, now I've had, dinner with Magnus Carlson. I've been friends with Gary Kasparov, like all these people who are my heroes, all throughout. I could be part of their culture in ways that I couldn't as a kid. But at the same time, I'm just not, no matter how much I study, discipline myself, work on this, get advice from people like Carlson or Carlson's coach or whoever, I'm not able to achieve. It doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to achieve.
That seems like that should be the book. If the book ends with you becoming a great, flawless chess player who I don't even know if people would believe it. I think it should be. There's something about the struggle and then ultimately the falling short and the sort of bittersweetness of you got as close as you could, but some moments are lost forever. I think that's the struggle and the relatability and the essence of the book. Do you know what I mean? If you could just stop what you're doing and become an Olympic swimmer at age 70, like, who's actually going to do that, and who actually could do that? Like, that's not the coming back to the thing that you used to love and getting really good at it and learning from it, but also the pain of having lost 30 years of it and the new appreciation. That's all what makes it relatable, because most people can't just go back and give everything to an old hobby anyway. So you know what I mean? I think that should be part of it. I do have sometimes.
And that's what the very next time I spoke to Robert Greene after that, he said, "You got to write a book." I said, "I can't. I have no ending for this book. I failed." Yeah. And he's like, "Are you kidding?" You can imagine the way he talks. He's like, "Are you kidding me? You did it. What are you going to be? Like, turn yourself back to an 18-year-old again? Of course not. You did it." But I don't really know what that means.
No, I think that is the ending. The ending is life, not a Disney movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like when you're working on a project, you need like a comp title. You need something that's like similar, but that's different enough that it doesn't feel like somebody already did it. There's this historian, her name is Nell Painter. She's a historian of like sort of African-American life. Anyways, she wrote this book called Old in Art School about her after she's like the peak of her profession. She's done everything she could just sort of live out her life as as just a professor emeritus, sort of person. And instead she retires as a historian and she goes back to art school. And the book's called Old in Art School. And it's about her doing something similar to chess, but also different than chess, and like what makes a good painter, right? Like, but she's deciding not just to be an old person who paints for fun, but to like be rigorous and serious about the thing, and to go back and get the education and the basis and the skills that she never seriously pursued before. And then to also, be humbled by the fact that she's an established person starting over as a beginner in a new field. And it's a really interesting book. I think you would like it.
I'm definitely going to read it. But what's interesting to me there too is that she put the word old in the title.
Yeah.
So I never realized I always thought I was young. I always think of myself as young. That's why I would go up in a comedy club. I didn't even think twice about starting to do stand-up comedy, even though it's a young person's game. But somehow doing it in the past few years, doing this chess stuff, I realized, oh, this is the problem. I'm old. Like, they're young and I'm old. And that's actually the main problem.
Yeah.
It's like if I was trying to play basketball again or something, like, oh, I can't do it. I can't jump. So,
well, like when I met you, I was a kid, right? And I was like, that was my identity was partly rooted in the fact that I was always the youngest person in every room. And now I have some gray hairs and I'm not, and I've been doing this thing a long time. And yeah, you just realize you sort of take for granted parts of your identity that are actually not stable, that they're changing and the world is changing around you. And that's I think think about how relatable that is though for the reader, because
that's a really good point.
Most people reading your book are old in the sense that they're not 20.
Yeah.
Right? They're having some reckoning with that. Like LeBron James is like one of the last athletes that started when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And like, so there's this part of life where just all the things from a period in your life, they seem stable, but actually day to day, they're dying and falling off. And then you have these sort of wake up call moments and you go, oh, like Seneca tells this story about returning to his childhood estate. You know, it's in terrible shape. These trees are dying, and he calls up the overseer and he's, you know, you're not taking care of this place. And the overseer is like, do you not recognize me? Like, I was a kid when you were a kid here. We're both old now. And he's like, these trees are dying not because they're not taken care of. They're dying of old age. This is how the lifespan of these trees. And it's in this moment that Seneca realizes he's old and the same process is happening to him. I just had this same experience. I checked into this hotel in Boulder that I realized I gave one of my first ever talks to. And I didn't realize that till I was walking down the hall. And the first thought I had is, this hotel is really going to shit. And then I realized, no, this hotel was nice when I was here last. And it's been 15 years. And then I thought, oh, I'm beat to shit too. You know, like
that is the experience. Like, and I had never felt that before. It really was a wake up call, like in every way, like the way my brain works, the way my health works, my response to winning or losing, like everything has aged. And I never had that experience before. I always felt like, oh, I've avoided aging somehow. And now I realized, A, everyone's younger, and B, oh, I just made a move. I remember thinking when I was a kid playing my dad, I would think he just made an old man move. Now I just made that same type of move. And it's just gross. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, what do I do to stop it? I'm going to completely stop drinking alcohol. That'll help. I'm going to make sure I sleep 8 hours a day and follow all the Andrew Huberman advice about sleeping 8 hours a day. I'm going to work out more. I'm going to be more disciplined about studying and you know, the types of games I play and tournament selection. And so you do all these things because you're older, but it's still, and you know more, but it still doesn't help. You're
just
old.
arresting the decline. You can't actually get back. You can just slow the process. And realizing that you used to be able to get away with not bringing 100% of yourself to something. And then now, if you're not at your A game, you suck.
Yeah, and they all know that, right? Because it's a very competitive game, and so it's a safe way to practice war. So, and these younger people they will kill you in an alley, like if they could. So it's like they know, oh, just keep this guy going till the 4th hour of play, and he's just gonna
fall apart.
Yeah, which is what happens.
Yeah.
So unless I win, I mean, I'm not saying I'm horrible. I'm just saying I can't get back to where I was.
No, you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness about this, obviously, this is what we just went through with the last president. If you're not aware of your decline as it's happening and you're not able to mitigate it and you're not able to compensate for it and you're not able to ultimately know what your limitations are, you'll find yourself in an impossible situation.
And you also have to know what sort of areas of life benefit with age as opposed to decline. Because I would say most things decline. But for instance, I was talking to Arthur Brooks, who's written a lot about this topic. The peak age, of course, for mathematicians in their 20s, like 25 years old. But the peak age for a historian is 69 years old.
Right.
Because you've
lived through history now.
Yeah, you've lived through history. And you know how to you don't have to come up with original ideas, but you're really good at connecting old ideas. So you could say, oh, this experience in COVID is like this other experience during the Great Depression. So younger people can't synthesize
You have a
these ideas.
larger cumulative base of knowledge. You have these sort of cumulative advantages in some ways, and then you have cumulative disadvantages in the sense that you're tired, your eyes hurt more, whatever. You have to figure out where that advantage. It's like musicians, you become less cool as you get older, but you actually become probably a better performer because you've done it longer.
Well, okay. Why with every band, though, like, let's just take Led Zeppelin or the Beatles, and they're like among the two, Judas Priest, let's take them.
I just saw
have
them a couple months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
But okay,
They're
they're
good.
playing their songs from the 1970s, right? Because that every band, it seems, has their 5-year window where they're amazing, they're the best in the world, and then they're never again able to write even one song.
Well, that's what I mean.
good.
I think that creatively, but music. Being a musician is not just writing songs; it's also performing songs.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like maybe their window, which isn't just raw skill; it's also what culturally you're allowed. You only have this sort of cultural window. Also, it's not like if we suddenly decided to value older musicians, they'd have hits. It's that we don't. Right.
I wonder if that's true, because again, I just don't like. I mean, if Led Zeppelin tried to make a new song now, I probably wouldn't like it. Whereas I love.
I think it's both. But I guess my point is they might be less great at writing new songs, but they also now have 3 decades or 4 decades of performing the song. And so the show is incredible.
Yeah.
And so, well, what are you optimizing for? You're optimizing for the thing that you're, a game you're unlikely to win, or are you optimizing for the performance, which is less sort of age sensitive?
Yeah, so I guess like the advice to me is, how do I optimize, my experience now involving this incredible activity, given my age, given my, that I probably can't achieve the goals I want to get, but what can I optimize in it in terms of telling this story?
And I think also the question is, do you love playing? Do you love being a chess player, or do you love chess? And, and so like, in sports, it's like, do you love the game of basketball, or do you love being the star point guard? And those are very different things. And what you actually love is like the sound of sneakers on the floor and the smell of the locker room and the cheer of the crowd and the strategy and the grind. If you love that, there's lots of ways you can participate. You can participate until the day you die. If you love something else about it, if you love it for more narcissistic reasons, then you only have your very brief playing window.
That's the problem. Like, let's put it in a musician sense. Some musicians might like, I like making a platinum album. And other musicians might like the whole music thing. Like writing is a really good thing, because you could always enjoy writing, reading, putting together new stories. I feel like writers never wear out. And that's, I'm oversimplifying, but like, yeah, with something that's competitive, like take basketball, sport I don't play, but like Michael Jordan, he clearly loved winning. It's painful to lose. Any competitive sport or game it's really painful to lose, no matter how much you love it. So Michael Jordan, though, he managed to convert that into owning a team, and he did play probably maybe a few more years, more than he would have liked, but it's painful to lose.
Here, we need to go in the bookstore because I want to show you a book related to this exact thing.
Oh, did we do the podcast?
Yeah, this is the podcast. Yeah.
This summer, Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Summer of Cinema is here. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Mission Impossible, Beverly Hills Cop, Good Burger, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bring the action with you and stream for free from all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.